Everybody. Um, Sorry, it didn't count me down, so I was a little like, wait, do I go? Happy Monday, and welcome to Unit 4, which is Islam and the Arab Empire. And you have to understand, the rise of Islam and the expansion of the Arab Empire in order to understand why the Crusades happen. And the Crusades, no shocker, is the next unit and what we're going to be doing next week. So we actually started this particular unit on Friday. I know it's been a while since I've kind of like talked to you guys. I wrote announcements on Google Classroom, but you online kiddos, if you're kind of like, oh my gosh, she's been kind of MIA, it's because I got strep last week and I was down for the count for about 3 days there. You still, I mean, good thing I was prepared because y'all were basically just reviewing and taking your test over Unit 3, so over Charlemagne and over the Byzantine Empire and the early Christian church. That's what y'all were testing over when you tested over Unit 3. There are still some of you that have not taken that test. And, I'll make an announcement on your window of opportunity that I'm going to give you to get in there and take it. Otherwise, of course, it will be a 0. And some of you guys online are not doing a very good job of, again, like keeping up with when you're supposed to take your formatives, your quizzes, and when you're supposed to take your tests. So the 0s that y'all are seeing in the grade book, of course, are because, I leave these assessment open for a few days and there's still nothing from y'all, even though they were due 3 days ago. So, if I don't hear from you and I don't understand why you're not taking it and the 3 days comes and goes, then it's a 0. So again, like if you're kind of like, why does she keep giving me 0s? Well, guys, I'm not going to give you weeks and weeks and weeks to make this stuff up. Like after 3 days, I'm moving on. You gotta keep up with your timelines here. So anyways, little housekeeping there before we get started. Okay, so Unit 4, again, we started on Friday, and I know it's Monday. I just didn't get around to making the video on Friday afternoon because, again, I'd been out for 3 days and it was kind of crazy. But we are more than likely going to test either on Thursday or Friday over Unit 4, and of course, I will make sure all the video lessons are uploaded for you guys way before that. I'm going to upload this video, which was Friday's lesson, and then I'm going to upload today's lesson also today. So anyway, sorry. I know that's a lot of like, can you just get to the point and land your plane? But I need y'all to know all that stuff. All right, Arab Empire. So just to get us started, some kind of foundational information on Islam is pretty important before we kind of go anywhere. And, the Arabian Peninsula, which is modern day Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, that whole area. They were, no shocker, tribal. And they were polytheistic, but they also worshipped a supreme god. And each tribe was ran by a sheikh, which is important to remember because that'll kind of come back into play here in a little bit with Muhammad. And their supreme god was symbolized by this sacred stone at the corner of the Kaaba, which was the first temple built by Abraham. Yes, the same Abraham that God makes the covenant with in the Old Testament. Okay, Islam is an Abrahamic religion, along with Judaism and Christianity. Okay, that means that all three of them stem from the covenant God made with Abraham. Now, to give you a little bit of a backstory here that's nowhere on the slides. Okay, Abraham's wife, Sarah, and again, all of this is in the Old Testament, she can't have children. And so she actually tells Abraham to go and have an affair with their servant girl, Hagar. because Sarah wants Abraham to be able to have a child of his own. And she's obviously, I can't give that to you, so I want you to go do this. So she sanctions the affair, and Abraham has a son with Hagar named Ishmael. However, the covenant with God is then made with Abraham. And of course, the promise God makes Abraham is like, I will make an incredible nation, a prosperous nation from you and your family. And he's like, how's that going to happen? My wife can't have kids. And boom, Sarah gets pregnant. And so Sarah has Isaac. And the prophets of the Old Testament, even all the way to Jesus, even though of course Jesus was divine, that whole line comes from Isaac, Sarah and Abraham's son, after the covenant is made. So the story goes is that once Sarah has Isaac, she struggles with Hagar and Ishmael being around. When she didn't think she could ever have a kid, she was kind of willing to, be okay with this setup. But once she has Isaac, she's basically like, I can't do this anymore. And so Hagar and Ishmael, according to Christian and Judea beliefs, that they leave, right? Well, in Muslim belief, the story goes actually that Abraham takes Hagar and Ishmael to Mecca. And when he takes them there, he builds the first temple for them. And the sacred stone is sent down from the heavens and given to Abraham to place as the cornerstone of the temple. And originally the stone was like pure white and like made of like beautiful, pure crystal-like substance. But it has turned black over the centuries because it is absorbing the sins of the world. So the Kaaba is the first temple, according to Muslim traditions, to be built by Abraham in Mecca with, again, the stone as its cornerstone. And so the tribes recognized God as the supreme God, but then they also worshipped all of these tribal gods. So they were like polytheistic, kind of. And they would pilgrimage to the Kaaba, and all around the Kaaba were like little statues and, like little things and tributes and icons and idols all around it that represented each tribe of the Arabian Peninsula. And so even prior to Muhammad, which is the prophet of Islam that we're about to get to, even before he makes his appearance, the pilgrimage to the Kaaba by the tribes is a thing in Arabic culture. Now, a lot of students always think, Allah is their God. Allah is the Muslim God. Guys, Allah is just God in Arabic. Okay, just like Yahweh is God in Hebrew. If you were a Christian living in the Middle East speaking Arabic, when you are saying your prayers to God, you would use the term Allah. Okay, and so a lot of times, students don't realize that that's all that is. Allah is just God in Arabic. And so, this is always kind of controversial because I'm teaching it from a historical perspective. I'm not teaching it from a theological perspective. And so when I say, that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all pray to the same God, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that they are praying the same way, or that they look at him the same way, or that they even believe in the same things. Obviously, they don't. But from a historical perspective, they're called the Abrahamic religions because the God that they worship is the God that made the covenant with Abraham. So again, it is the same God. And so, Allah doesn't make him different other than it's just, again, the Arabic term for God. And as I'll explain here in a little bit, Muslims actually believe Jesus was a hardcore fundamental prophet. They study not just the Quran, but the New Testament and the Old Testament. They believe Jesus will be the prophet that does come back to judge the living and the dead. There's a large amount of significance placed on Jesus Christ, even with Muslims. So again, there are connections here that I think y'all need to be very made aware of, especially given the world we live in today. So, but let's kind of stop for a second and talk about Muhammad. So, Muhammad is born into kind of what we would consider just a very middle class, like working family there in Mecca. And a lot of his immediate family dies when he's young, and he's raised by an uncle. And he's a carpenter for a time, but he's mostly turns into a caravan manager, which are camels, taking trade goods into these bigger cities. Mostly based off of, the caravan trade is mostly based out of like the Persian Gulf, and they take the camels and take the goods up to like Damascus and Jerusalem and other places. It's kind of like you can look at the camel caravan trade as like 18-wheelers on I-35. It's kind of like a similar situation. And that's what he's doing. He's essentially he's a camel caravan manager. And he meets Khadijah, who is going to be his first wife, who is a little bit older than him, and she's a widow, and she is highly wealthy. And so that is when he marries her, that's going to propel him into kind of the, very wealthy upper echelon of society in Mecca. And he doesn't like the people that he is now kind of hanging out with because of his wealth through his wife. And because of this, he actually begins to kind of leave the city on a regular basis, and he goes into the hills on the outskirts of Mecca and meditates. Well, again, Muslim tradition states that while he is there meditating, the angel Gabriel appears to him. This is the same angel that appears to Mary, to tell her you're carrying the Son of God. So the angel Gabriel shows up and gives him the final message of God. This is why Muhammad is not just known as the prophet of Islam. He is also called the final messenger of God. And so he is considered the final prophet. Gabriel gives him these revelations that he then, takes to heart and is later recorded as the Quran, which is, of course, the holy book of Islam. So Muhammad is going to go back into Mecca, and he is going to, go, oh my gosh, this has happened to me. I'm now a prophet. And he's going to go about, into Mecca, and he's going to, tell people what Gabriel told him. Well, in the course of 3 years of him doing all of this, he has like no followers. Pretty much. I mean, the only people that are following him are like his family members and Khadijah's family members. And so he's frustrated by this, but the Meccan people are also frustrated by him. They kind of look at him as a crazy person. Like they're kind of like, whatever, dude. You do you, but I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. And a lot of the reason why that is because the pilgrimage business in Mecca was a huge financial resource for the people there and for the families there. You have to think all of these tribes throughout Arabia were coming into Mecca, several times throughout the year. And, they're spending money, they're helping the local economy when they are there. And, if all of a sudden he's like, we've got to get rid of all of these little minor tribal gods and truly only worship the one supreme God, that's in their minds, they were like, that's going to mess with our business. Would you please shut up? So they run him out of town. They run he and Khadijah out of town. And when that happens, they go to Medina. Okay, which you can kind of see back behind my head, the map. Like you can see Mecca, and then Medina is north of Mecca. So they go to Medina, and in Medina, they end up getting way more supporters. So much so that they are actually going to return to Mecca with an army. and they are going to take over the city with a 10,000 man army. Now, this to me, again, I always like to point out is the biggest difference between the prophets of the Old Testament and then, of course, Jesus Christ and Muhammad. Jesus was never political. He was never militant. He's very anti-violence. My goodness, look at how he died. And so whereas Muhammad was not just a prophet, he was basically the sheikh of the Quraysh tribe, which is the tribe that he was from in Arabia. And, he becomes the political leader, aka the sheikh, and he is the prophet, and he is a military commander. So, again, like the prophets of the Old Testament and then Jesus Christ himself, they weren't ever doing any of that kind of stuff. So the city is going to quickly surrender. Most people are going to convert to Islam once they, militarily take over the city. And 2 years after that happens, and he goes and conquers a lot of area in and around Mecca and Medina. Muhammad is going to die. And in the next video, we're going to talk about, his successors who are called the caliphs and the rise of the caliphate, which is the empire. So, but I want to kind of stop right quick and talk about the pilgrimage because, it was so funny. The people of Mecca were so afraid that the pilgrimage business was going to go away. And that actually didn't happen at all. All Muslims are expected at least once in their life to make a pilgrimage still to the Kaaba, to the original temple, and to the Black Stone. And this is known as the Hajj. Right. And so you start in Mecca, again, at the Grand Mosque, and you circle the upper stairs of the Grand Mosque, and you circle the Kaaba 7 times. And then I want to say it's 7's a pretty big number in the Old Testament. That's why it's considered a lucky number, is, of course, because there's tons of references to the number 7 throughout the Bible. And I want to say, yes, they circle the Kaaba 7 times to start their pilgrimage. But then I think it's 7 miles total, to do the pilgrimage and make your way back to the Grand Mosque. Now, don't quote me on that. I would have to Google it to make sure, but 7's in there somewhere. But this video will kind of explain what all they have to do and kind of how it has evolved into the modern era. It's actually kind of interesting. There's always deaths that happen due to trampling and human stampeding during the pilgrimage season in Mecca. And so now they've created these kind of ways to make sure that isn't happening anymore. So anyways, this video is just kind of interesting and tells you some of those things. And then we ended on Friday with the 5 pillars of Islam, which pilgrimage is definitely on there. If everybody's supposed to do it at least once in their life, but it's belief, of course. I mean, hello, that's going to be a pretty mainstay in any religion, is belief. And then prayer, of course, they pray 5 times a day. It has to do with where the sun is. It's morning, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, and then when the sun sets, I believe. But they pray, of course, all of my students are well, yeah, they pray to the east. Well, they pray east because the Kaaba is east of us because we are in the Western Hemisphere. And that's what Muslims are doing when they pray. They are facing east to face the Kaaba. So, if you are a Muslim living in, let's say, India, which of course is in the Eastern Hemisphere, and, to the east of the Kaaba, you would face west when you pray. So, a lot of students are well, they always pray east. Well, they always pray east if they're in the Western Hemisphere. But, that they're facing the Kaaba is what they are doing. And so prayer is, of course, a big part of their daily life, charity, and then they fast for a month during the month of Ramadan. And they cannot eat, drink, smoke, or have sex. They can't have personal relations during the daylight hours. They can't do that for a month during the time of Ramadan. So, but anyways, these are and then pilgrimage, the Hajj. They have to complete it at least once in their life, as long as they are able and financially, if they're physically capable and financially capable of doing so. It's not like they go to hell if they can't get it done, because they're poor or they're sick or something. So anyways, that is it. That was what we talked about on Friday. So this is the first lesson of Unit 4. And again, I'm going to turn around and record the one from today. So if you have any questions, always just ask.